think we got to take the proper time to celebrate one of the game's best players who had just an amazing milestone last night, and that is Sidney Crosby. No longer Sid the Kid. It's Sidney Crosby. He's the man who scored the golden goal and the man who now has 500 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, how special of a moment was that for you as a guy who covers the Penguins? I'm sure you grew up a massive Pens fan, cheering for Sidney Crosby your whole life, and also to do it at home and against the Flyers. It just kind of all lined up perfectly, didn't it?
It was poetic. I think that's the way, to say it, man. It's also his 50th goal against the Flyers. It came on Jaromir Jagr's 50th birthday, another Penguin great. It was assisted by Evgeny Malkin, who has been there by his side, ever since he came into the league. And, and of course, you nailed it. He scored it against, the biggest rival for the Penguins. And it was just really magical because, for, of time about a decade ago, I don't think any of us knew this was going to happen just because of what happened with the David Steckel situation. And then it got worse with Victor Hedman. And, a lot of us in the fan base were like, he's skating, but is he ever going to play again? He was not cleared for contact for so many months. And then you finally have the comeback and, it felt obviously real again just because of what's happened since then. But, it's just, it's hard to put it into words just because of what he's done for this city and this team. But it's something that I was looking forward to for, I think, a long time now. Obviously, his rival Alex Ovechkin hit that mark a long time ago, which is that's he's the greatest goal scorer I think the league has ever seen. But just to see Sid do it, against his rival on that night, just from just Evgeny Malkin, it's you can't script it better than that. And it came from his office. The hashtag Sid down low is a saying that a lot of us on Penguins Twitter use just because he's so deadly behind the net. And he did just that. He got that pass from Gino and then just fired it glove side past Carter Hart. He had no chance on that. And, it looked like it was going to happen a couple games prior. I would have been probably more upset if it happened in Ottawa because there was only about 250 fans there or something like that. Then they play New Jersey.
It's basically the janitors are there and then their friends. They get tickets to bring their friends, and that's about it. That's all that's sitting there. It would have been a waste. And one of the cooler things too is just seeing the bench all skate out onto the ice as if it was an overtime winner. It wasn't. It was in the middle of the game, but still the whole team understood the gravity of that moment. The building was going wild, and they all just legs over the bench, skate right over to him, massive pile up, and it was really just a surreal moment.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect, honestly, the entire team to come out. I thought it would just be, like a quick celebration, just like for his 1,000th point. That was about 2017, I believe, when Chris Kunitz scored that. But when the entire team just came on off the bench, I was just like, well, it's time to get at least a little emotional just because, I hope every Penguin fan just cherishes this because – obviously he's on the wrong side of 30 at this point. Who knows how long he's going to keep playing? Nothing is ever guaranteed. But, especially just for a game like this in February where the Eastern Conference is kind of, I should say, wrapped up playoff teams wise. The seeding is obviously still going to we'll probably get into that at some point. These are milestones that, you're going to remember where you are, just for the rest of your life when you saw Sidney Crosby score his 500th. And, for the life of me, had he not missed so much time with that concussion, we probably would have been celebrating close to his 600th last night, which is, obviously disappointing, though. I'm hoping at some point he does get to do that. And then, seeing Mario Lemieux's speech, just a player, obviously, that he needs no introduction. Sid, I know, played with him for a little bit, and then his family is there, and they're tearing up, and it was just a really emotional, I think, night for just a lot of us. Especially I wasn't alive for the peak Mario years. I wish I was, just because seeing him and Yager do the business was just incredible with how amazingly skillful they were in the early '90s. But I'm pretty thankful that I've been able to grow up with this player for 2/3 of my life at this point. And seeing something like that will never get old.
And I can think back to when Sidney Crosby made his return from the concussion against the Islanders. That was probably one of the better individual performances I've seen just because of the sheer emotion of that. Do you remember that game and just like what you were feeling in that time?
I remember exactly where I was. I sat down to watch. I knew it was going to be an emotional night. I believe I was only 13 at the time, if I recall correctly. I was getting ready to actually go to hockey practice because I was late for it, but I didn't really care. And right when he scored that goal, I think it was my mom and I just jumped up and I just probably let out the biggest scream. It was just, it was awesome. I mean, because then you saw like the fans were just had the signs and everything. Because again, we never knew this was going to happen again because we never knew if he was going to play.
Right.
So that was just such a talk about probably the most emotional night during the Crosby era outside of the Cups and this. I would say that's obviously right up there. So I remember that like it was yesterday. I'm surprised the neighbors didn't call the police or something because we were just so excited. Of course,
They were probably joining in on the party with you guys.
Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
Yeah, you would think so. One of the coolest things about Sid, and I didn't realize this obviously until I saw them put out the graphic yesterday, but of his 500 goals, 107 different teammates assisted on 107
Yep.
different players. I don't know why that is just such a mind-boggling statistic to me, but what it shows me and what it says is just how go with the flow this guy is. Like, didn't matter the amount of turnover that this guy had. Like, you look at who his wings have been his entire career. Like, there's a couple staples he could be. I mean, Chris Kunitz was a staple for many years, but like for a lot of his career, there was kind of just kept churning out wingers upon every year, whether it was Connor Sherry who would come in, Pascal Dupuis, he had some time with Gensel, with Phil. There's, a number of guys who he's, been able to play with, and he plays at the same rate no matter who he's with. And he's always the best player on the ice no matter what. And he elevates everyone else's game. And when I saw that number, 107 different players, it was just probably the most mind-blowing stat that I saw in reference to like all the numbers that were being thrown out to me about these milestone from Crosby last night.
It was weird. There were some players on there that I was like, okay, I know I didn't remember seeing him assist on a Sidney Crosby goal. It was just a great stat that the Penguins PR team put out there. I was surprised that Gonchar was still top 5 because he hasn't been with the team in a decade. Was definitely, I was like, wow, I did not realize. I watched him play so much with Sid. I just didn't realize that he still was in the top 5. Gino's going to be up there, and Gensel's going to creep up there sooner rather than later. But it was pretty crazy. Old man Jack Johnson was tied with 4 with Mario Lemieux. They both had 4 assists on Sidney Crosby goals, and just the both ends of the spectrum right there. It's just awesome to see. But yeah, that was really cool.
I'm looking at it now, and maybe I want to try and pull out some really interesting names that I would have. Mickey DuPont. Who the hell is that guy?
Oh man,
like who is?
Gotta be. I think that's gotta be from like his rookie year or something. I don't remember him from any of the early cup teams.
Me either. But he's got an assist. He's got an assist on one of these goals here. Lyle Odelin. I've never heard of that player in my life. Lyle Odelin, and like. I consider myself, a pretty smart guy. I played the video game growing up, and to me, that always allowed me to know all the rosters and all the players. And I've never come across that name in my life, but somehow, some way, he was able to get an assist on a Sidney Crosby goal. Rick Jackman, a throwback name there. Yeah. Zdeněk Mihalik able to get Aaron Asham.
Yeah.
So many guys were just like, really? I mean, it's actually hilarious to look at some of these names. Brent Johnson, Luca Caputi, former Maple Leaf, Luca Caputi, another one there. Just so many guys who factored into this fantastic milestone. But of course, Gino Malkin assisting on 109 of them, being the top guy. And it was just fitting that he also assisted on number 500 too, almost as if it was meant to be. The thing that I think is really cool about Sidney Crosby, though, is that there's a large portion of like the American fan base that loves Sid for what he's done for Pittsburgh, with Pittsburgh being, just like a big American market or a good market in the hockey world. But then there's, all the love that he gets from Canada. And when I think of my favorite Sidney Crosby moment, Dave, I'm sure you have the same exact favorite moment, and that's the golden goal at the Olympics in 2010. And I'll always think of him as the guy who scored the golden goal. I was having this conversation on my radio show earlier, Leafs Lunch, and the conversation kind of got sparked. Like, well, do you think of Sidney Crosby as your 3-time Cup champion for the Pittsburgh Penguins, or do you think of Sidney Crosby or the guy who scored the golden goal? I'm curious to see how you guys define his career and how you first think of Crosby, because I always think of him as the guy who scored the golden goal. I would imagine, Hunter, maybe you have a different perspective being an American and being somebody who's born and raised and lives and covers the Pittsburgh Penguins, though.
Yeah, I consider him, obviously because it was scored against the United States. I'm not gonna, like that moment too much. It's probably the only time I've ever rooted against Sidney Crosby. But I think the Penguins fans and me especially, we think of him as the guy that's won 3 Stanley Cups. The second time they've gone back to back. I think a lot of us also consider him just a top 5 to top 10 pure NHL player of all time, as well, and just someone that when the city needed a spark for this hockey team, because it was down in the ditches during the years before Crosby, when you had Rico Fata as one of your leading scorers, and I mean, not many people obviously wanted to go to the game just because they were so bad. But when the city badly needed someone to just give the team a spark, they won the lottery. I know tanking and all that, but it's been history right there. So I think the city and just all Penguins fans around the world, think of him as just the player that's won 3 Stanley Cups and the 2 Conn Smythes and the multiple Hart trophies and the scoring titles. And obviously he still has that golden goal because that's one of the best hockey memories in recent memory, and I think of all time as well, just because of the circumstances. And he had the World Cup of hockey as well. But I think here, he's just seen as, I should say, also like a living hockey legend. I should say.
Yeah, that's basically what he is. Dave, how about you? How do you define Sidney Crosby in your eyes?
For me, it's like a guy that delivered whenever called upon, right? I mean, you talk about those Olympics, and people were talking about how he wasn't performing. Like going into that game, he hadn't, had the Sidney Crosby type of effect, and it's almost like you want to talk bad about Sid, he's gonna pull up and he's gonna make you look silly. And I always remember just like the famous Iggy call too. Like when you think of that goal,
Yeah.
and just and at first just doubting whether it went in, right, at first, because he started celebrating, but like nobody like thought that shot was gonna go in. Especially poor Ryan Miller there. But yeah, like for me, it's just a guy that had so much pressure on him as a number 1 pick, as you said, Hunter, had to pretty much revive a Penguins team that was on
Well,
the verge.
not just the number 1 pick, but like touted as the next one.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have Wayne Gretzky, and he was touted as the next one, the next great Wayne Gretzky, and I think he's lived up to the billing. I mean, the term generational talent gets thrown around a lot, but I think when you look at it, I mean, I can't think of anybody else I would really put there who's lived up to the bill. And there may have been guys who, like there was a lot of talk about Eric Lindros coming out into starting his career, but injuries kind of derailed him. He never really became that generational superstar. But Sidney Crosby did do that, and he did that. And probably the only one since Wayne. And then you could possibly, I guess you could put McDavid back into that category as well. But I think the fact that he lived up those expectations, and you said it right, as a guy who was called upon and delivered when called upon, whether it was for Team Canada, whether it was for when he was playing, junior, whether he's playing for Canada at the World Juniors, or whether he was playing for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was called upon and he delivered. And he's one of the greatest hockey players to lace him up. I think we can all at least come into agreement on that one.